Thank you very much for joining this panel, and whoever is here, hi. We will be discussing about green finance, which means lots of things to many people. But in essence, if we aim to achieve green economy, for sure we need to touch and somehow modify structurally the financial system in order to enable a green economy. And there are many levers to do this and many attempts in many countries. And my guest here, each of them has a perspective, a very different perspective. So I will ask you to introduce yourselves. I know who you are, but you do a better job at talking about your interest in this topic. So Virginia, please.
Yes. Thank you, Andra. So I am Virginija Gecaite, currently heading European Investment Bank operations in Lithuania. And my interest on this topic is pretty obvious. European Investment Bank is the climate bank of the EU. And we are owed by the member states of the EU and the European Commission, and our shareholders have committed to a very ambitious goals. By 2050 to become climate neutral, and by 2030 to reduce CO2 emissions by 50%. And given our ownership structure, we had to inevitably become a climate bank and create a detailed investment strategies and a roadmap how to get there. So maybe later on I can elaborate on that.
Yeah, my name is Antonio Gargano, and I'm an associate professor of finance at the University of Houston. So my research is an intersection between household finance and fintech, so which means I try to understand and improve how consumers make decisions, in particular consumption, saving, and investment decisions. And so my interest in this topic comes from the fact that I've been working with a few fintech that help consumers in being more responsible, like more sustainable in their consumption decisions. So that's where I come from. Help individuals being more sustainable, which is very hard, something very hard.
So my name is Nora. I'm from the Lithuania Green Finance Institute. So green finance is my DNA. And we are a special dedicated institution established in Lithuania a couple of years ago to be the center of competences and the center of ecosystem, expanding green finance products, expanding understanding of green finance, and building knowledge of consumers as well, of consuming with purpose, investing with purpose, and working with also academia as well as private companies as well as fintechs, so that our 2050 goal in EU to be climate neutral becomes a reality.
I'm a adjunct professor at New York University, and my interest basically focused on investing strategy and portfolio choices, and in particular on a compromise that investors can make, since for one thing we invest to increase our wealth, and socially responsible investors also try to use some strategies that, if not improve our world, but try to make it less dangerous. It's always a compromise, and I do number crunching, and therefore I'm interested in some optimization processes that allow to address this problem.
So Virginia, I come back to you as a banker among us. We talk about banking and we think about it, but you do it. So can you share with us what are the criteria that you apply in order to select and invest in green projects? What do you have in the front of your mind, and what are the criteria? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. So Well, one thing for sure, for start, is that wherever we invest, and not all of our investments are, oriented to climate. 50% of our investments, at least 50% of our investments are. The remaining is not, because we have other priorities as well. However, that remaining part has to be at least climate neutral. So we are Paris Agreement aligned. So none of our activity has to be in any way kind of bad for climate. We have our energy strategy that we don't finance fossil fuel, for example. And then when we're looking into investments, let's say we look for the real tangible value. So it's not only, let's say, the label that we after, but we see, okay, what's the, how much of the CO2 emissions were reduced? What's the preservation, biological preservation that has been achieved? For example, more of the recent projects where we have put our money in is for a green steel factory. So if you know, steel is one of the most polluting sectors. And in the manufacturing of steel process, the coal was substituted with hydrogen. And for electrolysis purposes, hydrogen is produced through green energy. So in this way, let's say the CO2 emissions are reduced by 95%. Other attractive project that is also we invested last year, it was first of our carbon capture and storage, which effectively means that every year 800,000 tons of CO2 are permanently stored under the bed of the Northern Sea. And 800,000 tons of CO2 equates to the entire year of CO2 emitted via Stockholm road traffic. So these, let's say, this is sort of, just gives you an example of our investments. And last year we made 60 billion of those. So these are just more of recent ones that are relevant for the region.
Thank you very much. Alec, you look at ESG criteria for investment. What is your view, observing what the data up to now? There are many arguments, pros and cons, and where do you think we are now, and what we should be doing to kind of deal with this problem of measurement, comparability, and sometimes wishful thinking? Yeah.
Well, the complex problem with investing choice is that if investors want to invest in the companies that promote green energies, for example, they may encounter the situation that returns of these companies are lower than those of the companies that don't care much. So this is conundrum for investors, even for those who want to try, to look, at least, if not to be, but at least to look socially responsible. What we suggest to do is that if you really are socially responsible investors, you should use performance measures of your investment that explicitly depend on this factor, for example, on greenhouse emissions. And let me explain it in a few words, a little bit more to expand on it. So the classical performance measure in classical finance, it's so-called Sharpe ratio. It's a ratio between return of your portfolio to volatility of your portfolio. And most people actually hate losses more than love their earnings or profits. And that's why there is a compromise. Most investors would be ready to sacrifice with some returns in order to have a portfolio with smaller volatility that doesn't subject them to such losses that happen during the bear market. But we have only two factors in classical finance. It's returns, we want to increase them, and volatility that we want to decrease. Now, if you are socially responsible investors, there is a third dimension in this optimization process that characterize the exposure of the given company to greenhouse emissions or in producing greenhouse emission. So then you need to compromise between three different dimensions. And that's what we suggest to do in order to investors to be more consistent in their desires and then in their practical actions. It's always a compromise. By the same token, you sacrifice with a return to decrease volatility of your portfolio. You may want, if you're really a socially responsible person, you may want to decrease your potential returns by addressing greenhouse emissions. And that's what my research is about.
Okay, thank you. Nora, I go to you now. So you are a green finance expert, and you have been involved in the establishing the Sustainability Finance Forum in Lithuania. So bringing together different parts of the society in order to agree the way forward. Tell us the story, what we can learn from you, what worked, what didn't work, and what are you really proud of?
I'm so glad you asked. So one of the first things we did after the Green Finance Institute itself was established was to start building the ecosystem. And we realized from the get-go that we don't need an ecosystem of regulators or ministries. We have many ministries here in Lithuania that touch upon environmental matters, including Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Economics and Innovation. We need those people, but we also need academics so that we actually can develop performance ratios, as was mentioned, that are not classical finance measures because they do not quite capture of all the intentions. And we are dealing with a situation of, pricing reduction of carbon, pricing nature preservation. This hasn't been done before. We need academics and researchers and scientists for that. But we also need businesses on board because these are the people on the ground who will have to invest. We might want to fund good projects, but if no business is doing green steel project, there will be nothing to fund. So we started building that, and we were very proactive. And to date, we have over 150 members in Lithuania who meet regularly in different groups based on the questions that need to be addressed. And we're trying to solve the the fundamental issue that we're trying to solve is when you talk to businesses, they say there's plenty of good green ideas, there's not enough money. When you talk to investors, they say, oh, we're happy to invest in green projects as long as they provide a certain return and are with certain volatility. And there's not many to go around. So we're trying to find solutions. And sometimes it is about small regulatory changes. So offering support, offering guarantees, getting it kick-started. Sometimes it's the bigger issues. So the hardest issue we tackle is data. And I guess those academics here know how important it is to get good data. And we have very little data. It's very sad because we have commitments. Paris Agreement is celebrating its 10th year anniversary this year. And we are still having issues in calculating CO2 emissions of our daily activities. We still don't have good routines of recording that. So when it comes to introducing that as a element in assessing portfolio performance, it's a huge problem. We do not have good coverage. And for that, we need even structural change. And here we start engaging with fintechs. And we are very happy to have such a big fintech community in Lithuania going and saying, maybe you can offer some solutions on how we can deal with some issues. And we're very happy. We have some very promising collaborations ongoing. So engaging with all of these stakeholders really works. What doesn't work is it's not quick, okay? Nobody should have, there's no silver bullets. It's a long and arduous work to get this off the ground. And if anybody is looking and saying, well, we've been around for 2 years, what have we done? Well, we built a community. Have we actually increased green finance in Lithuania? We hope we contributed, but we do not see like a huge somehow take-up. It doesn't work that way. It's a gradual process. And working with consumers, because these are ultimately the ones that have to make decisions, they are creatures of habit, and you have to be open that it will take years. Hopefully, things will start to change from all that hard work and having all the systems, but we need to come prepared to that dialogue with consumers. And here, the working with academics help a lot because we have some solid grounding. This is not greenwashing, this is now data. Working with businesses is great because we say it's not just empty talk, people will follow through. And then the regulators are hearing all of that debate, and then hopefully they then stand behind us when we say to the consumers, look, if you do this, you will be contributing to a greener tomorrow.
Thank you, Nora. Antonio, you have a very specific view as a researcher,
Yes.
and you looked at influencing individuals,
Yes.
nudging them to adjust their behavior or at least become more aware about the impact of their consuming habits.
Yes.
What did you see?
Yeah, so I completely share, your opinion about the main problem is to measure carbon footprint. So I work with an Italian neobank that offers customers tools to be more sustainable. The first tool is a carbon calculator. So imagine like it as a spending balance, right? In the same way you see how much you spent in a given month, then you can also see how many, what is the footprint of your spending. Now, the first problem is how do we compute those emissions? So what banks do at the moment, it's easy to do from card transactions, because every time you do a transaction with a credit or a debit card, that transaction is associated with a merchant category code. And so there are then companies that compute the carbon per euro for each of these merchant category code. And so then it's only a matter of multiplying the amount you spend in a merchant category code by the footprint of that merchant category code. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is some of these merchant category codes are very broad, while some merchant category codes are very specific. So the first problem is how do we measure carbon footprint? Because measuring, it's very complex, but it's not just about measuring, right? It's how do we then communicate this information? Because I can tell you your footprint is 100 kilos. Was 100 kilos this month. Is this a lot? Is that little? To be honest, I wouldn't know, right? Because if I tell you spent 1,000 kilos, that is very easy. So 1,000 euros, it's easy for you to benchmark because okay, my income was whatever, 4,000. So I know it's, this is doable. So it's not just about computing, it's about also communicating that information. You cannot just tell your footprint was this one. You need to translate this information in a way that consumers can understand. For example, in terms of trees that need to be planted. And also, even if you provide this information, this is not enough because you need tools so that people act based on this information. So maybe you need to provide incentives, or you need to there are some apps that are developing some sort of gamification, right, around this information. So it's not just about estimating, it's about communicating, it's about also providing incentives. So what we find is, interestingly, is that people, our users in our app, they are willing to subscribe to this carbon calculator, but they don't seem to change their behavior. And this means then we need to, understand further why this is the case and then act on these channels. But, measuring and providing this information alone, that's not enough. unfortunately.
Okay. Did you find anything else that worked, or not even in your research? If outside this.
What we found, because this was the first tool, the second tool was a carbon offsetting program. So basically, what happened is that users, by paying a monthly fee, they get an offset of up to 1,000 kilos. So this has a huge effect. But again, this is a mechanical effect, no? Because you pay a fixed amount of euros, then you get this allowance, monthly allowance. So this reduces your emission by 1,000 kilo. But again, we don't see any change in consumption. So carbon offsetting works, but it's a mechanical effect. No, we still don't see people changing their consumption. And when I say it works, then it works conditional on adoption. And what's the problem there? It's only a small fraction of individuals are willing to pay to offset those transactions. That's why I was saying it's a difficult problem. Yes.
Yeah. A more, let's say, general question. Each of you could take it, but even the word green raises entire debates. So I find that in this very polarized world, we are not carrying a purely technical execution of a strategy towards becoming green, but it's also almost I wouldn't say ideological, but it requires an effort in communication and persuasion, and it's an entire almost political project to be able to execute what we want to execute when we know that this is the path. And I think we see this at every level, so at individual level, but at country level. How do you for example, in the investment strategy, how this geopolitical current geopolitical environment influences the decisions and the energy mix, and can you hold the line, or you just have to?
Well, yeah, I think right now there is quite a stress, let's say, on a green finance because of the, as you mentioned, intense geopolitical situation where countries had to shift their priorities from green agenda to spending increases on security and defense. We've been living in a high interest rate environment for some time, and these investments are capital heavy. So naturally, in a short term, it might be easier to finance something with a fossil fuel, rather than investing in, let's say, renewables. But the thing is that in Europe, we do have policies in place, and regulatory frameworks are, well defined and structured. And I do believe that we are beyond the point of any kind of return. So the goals are set and they are high, and then certain recalibrations are needed. For example, what we see is, let's say, there is no harmonized approach in how renewables are being developed. Like the recent case in Spain, the blackout, it shows that yes, the grids effectively they could not deal with the increased capacity of the energy production through solar systems. So we as a bank right now try to finance portfolios of renewables instead of just financing a wind or solar. We go with the entire package of storage as well as grids. So overall, it kind of helps to streamline the holistic strategy.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if it's a geopolitical issue, but from the point of view of consumers, there is clearly a geographical problem in a sense that we ran a survey on the app users asking, okay, why you didn't change your behavior? Again, this is an Italian neobank, and some people wrote, well, because even if I do, it's useless, because even if all Italians, right, reduce their emission to zero, this would have a very minor effect. Because obviously, I mean, what they responded is that the type of consumers who should change should be in China, in the US. So that's a problem where you try to push consumers to be more sustainable, especially in small countries, because those small, I mean, Italy is not a small country, but in terms of like emissions, is definitely is not as big as India, China, and the US. You have the problem that even if, right, all Italians reduce their emission, this will still have very little effect.
What do you see, Nora, in your community?
Yes, so it's a very old and very familiar debate. We started with many years ago, like this idea of social responsibility. That got kind of washed out, so we rebranded and we started talking about sustainability. Now that got washed out, got rebranded, we're talking about green, and that one is getting now a bit of a washout, and now we're going to talk about clean. Okay, so even in Europe, we're now talking about clean deal, no longer green deal. But the essence is still the same, and I think the science is clear, and we need to talk science. The Earth is warming. We see more weather extremes. Every one of us experiences that, especially Italians. They should be familiar about that. And it is from human fossil fuel consumption. So the science is clear, the commitments are there. We either do something or not. And that narrative gets to the ground, especially when you manage to combine things. So yes, we have a security situation, but investing in security can also be investing in sustainability. So for example, renewable energy, it's energy independence that Lithuania has achieved proudly, and this also gives us resilience in case of military conflict escalation. The same can be said about other things. So for example, technologies that allow Europe to produce batteries, for example, that instead, because we do not have precious materials, but introducing recycling, pulling it out from the batteries that we have on the ground, from our garbage, make garbage into resources. Again, that builds resilience, it builds competitiveness. So it's getting a new rebranding. It is communication, though, is key. And communicating with consumers is notoriously hard. And many, many mistakes have been made. And we are trying to learn from them. Corporate social responsibility was an excellent idea. It's solid. It just got bad press. So let's try not to ruin that now with clean, and hopefully we will communicate that even one person choosing to take a train rather than fly from Vilnius to Riga, or to that is the way to go.
And the last question, yeah.
Yes, I agree with everyone, with everything was said. Regulation is key. And attempts by various activists, say, to convince or CEOs, it simply doesn't work because CEOs are just humans. They have fiduciary responsibilities before their investors, and they must provide maximum profits. And of course, there are ways, technically, investors that own the company formally can vote in some demands that would require from the company invest in green technology and all that stuff. And they don't do it because still most investors simply invest for the sake of increasing their wealth. So regulation, regulation is key. Technological progress is very important because when alternative sources of energy will become cheap enough, they simply kill all this dirty industries, so to speak, brown industries, as we call it. Unfortunately, it takes time. There is blended finance, as you probably know, of course, when government invests along with private investors. We have in US very rich billionaires that do invest in green technology, but it's nearly not enough. On the other hand, some right politicians even sue the company who want to invest in green technology because they treat it as an antitrust issue. If all banks decide that they will not fund oil industry, it's antitrust issue. And so they don't want to get involved in lawsuits and so on. And so again, regulation and technological progress is the way to go.
Thank you very much. That's all our time for today. Yeah, let's continue the conversation outside.
Thank you very much.